I wanted just to share with you a real quick metaphorical example that I learned about the symbolism of communion. And this, first of all, is symbolic of the grave. I believe it's Galatians 3:13. It talks about their mouths were open sepulchres, their throats are graves, something like that. And when I started to look at the practice of what we call communion, I began to really get fascinated with this broken wafer that comes down into the portal of death and rests in the belly. So I started seeing a metaphorical example of the pattern of Jesus, or Christ, breaking his body, its body, going down the throat, the grave, and resting in the belly. I started to see a pattern there. And you know, there's the parable that talks about the wheat that grows in the field, and then when it's done growing, it's harvested. When it's harvested, it's threshed, and then it's brought into the barn, and the scripture says this is the end of the age. The end of the age. So the question that I had to ask myself is, what do we do with that product then? If this is the end of the age where you are seeded, grow, harvested, threshed, the grain is gathered and put into sacks, that's the end of the age, then what can we expect in the next age? Jesus said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. That told me that there was this being of some importance that had already been through this cycle, and it came back in the form of us, divinity in us, that broke its immortal status, broken bread, and was willing to take on the form of a servant, descend down into the plane of mortality, and rest in the belly. You follow me so far? I didn't say that too well. And so when it is said, do this, the way that I take this, that is, do this to remember who you are. You are divinity that surrendered your immortal status, the broken body. You have descended down into the material plane, into mortality, and you're resting in the belly. The belly is compared to Jonah being swallowed up in the belly of the great fish. That's the age of Pisces. So divinity has been incubating and resting in this age. And so when we see these patterns and these rituals, we're supposed to remember our journey. Divinity, knowing all things, experiencing all things, yet choosing to put itself inside of a servant for this age. That's who you are.
Yes.
It's your journey. Isn't that a powerful symbol?
Yes.
It's said much better in my book. I don't want that up here. But,
Yeah.
all right, we're ready.
We'll work on it. This was an Alvin Boyd Kuhn book. I was actually, well, I'll read something out of that book tonight. I think it would feel a little better with some things if I could get to share it tonight. So, I always did, I do this every week at home in a church. It's not really a church. We call it Clear River Teaching Center, but it's incorporated as Cornerstone Family Church. So, you know, people give, we tell them, you know, your gifts are tax deductible either way, whether it's Lynn Hayes Ministries or Clear River Teaching Center or Cornerstone Family Church. But Cornerstone Family Church is an incorporation that I formed, 20-something years ago, which is the third church that I had actually formed and built. And so my concept and my idea of a church goes back more into the Greek than it would be, or the Hebrew, than it would be what your idea of a church is. Because church comes from the Greek word ekklesia, which is two words actually. Ek or ex, and kleo, ecclesia. And the word ek, or ex, actually means the source of the origin of something. It means its origination. And kleo, or klesia, can be the power of a word released. So where is the source or the origin of the power of the word that you release? Because words are sperma. Did it tell you that in the Bible?
Yep.
It does. You understand what a sperma is? Sperma is a seed, and a seed's looking for an egg for creation. They don't all get there. You know that, don't you?
Yep. There's
30, 60, and 100, right? So that simply means that a big portion of your words fall by the wayside. You can go ahead and say, thank God. Otherwise, you would not like the crop you get. Because we don't know, pay attention to words because we don't realize they do have power. The head of the physical body is just exactly like the gonads or the lower section. The only difference is the head is constructed in such a way that it has both a phallus and the yoni. So it has both sexes in it. So that your mouth is like a birthing womb, or the entrance of the womb, and then the tongue, of course, becomes the phallic. Now that's not vulgar, dirty. It's just something that you as adults should know. You need to know that. So when you read the Old Testament, if you don't understand that circumcision was not just the male penis, it had also to do with the tongue. So if you don't understand that circumcision dealt both with the flesh and what it will produce, and the tongue and what it will produce. So these are things that we don't know because religion has taken away, as it says in Luke 11, the scribes, the Pharisees, the rulers and the teachers, in other words, the apostles and prophets and pastors, the ones especially you have on television, they take away the keys because they don't want the keys to go into the mysteries, but they sure don't want you to take the keys and go into the mysteries. And so I've been on a quest for quite a long time, a number of years, to gain those keys, to capture those keys so that I can understand the mysteries. But it's not just for me, even though it's a personal journey. You can judge me and criticize me and condemn me, but I have to walk my shoes for me. And you do the same thing. And when we learn many of the great truths, we can learn to rest and not judge people, but allow people to be. And Jesus said, and I think there's already been quite a bit said about judgment, which I want to use this to talk about judgment because it's such a gross misunderstanding of what we have received, especially from the church system, but then it filters over into a court system. And it does it, they're exact copies of each other. So the judge in the courtroom is the pastor, the bishop, the evangelist, the preacher, the teacher behind the pulpit. And what we think that he says is law. We think it is. And many times we comply to it. And so we bow to it. We surrender to it. And as we do that, many times it can mess up your life. You know, just like Davis, just like Mark. You know, many people would have that. I don't have that testimony myself. But I have seen people that have had that testimony. But we have things, all of us have things that come into our life in many different ways that affect our life. And as it affects you, you can let it infect you. And when it infects you, it can control you, it can manipulate you, it can make you sick, it can do a lot of different things. And it does. And so our work and our responsibility in the journey is for self. Okay? So I can't be responsible for any other than that, and I can try to teach or do this, that, and other. I want to go back to we opened our conference in Dalton with the Yellow Brick Road, and Dorothy and the Yellow Brick Road, somewhere over the rainbow. Carol sang that song, and we did a few things, and then Barbara, I'm glad she did this. She got really motivated to do this. And she called me and I said, yes, I think you should do that. And she said, well, I'd like for you to open up with that. And I said, okay, I'll be glad to. Because I just shared a few things. And it was kind of a shock to me that a lot of people didn't know some of the history that goes along with Baum's book. The Wizard of Oz. And I shared a little bit about that, The Wizard of Oz, and that story, but I wanted to say a few other things about the story. In Baum's book, when Dorothy, when the house in her dream, in her vision, fell on the Wicked Witch of the West, what did Dorothy get out of that? Y'all remember?
Shoes.
Exactly. Shoes. In Baum's book, the shoes are silver. And the reason they're silver in the book is he's using the parallel, again, that goes with the Theosophy, or with the silver represents redemption, and redemption, it has to do with your walk. And so therefore, the shoes are the silver slippers were walking on the golden streets, or the yellow brick road. So it's the design where that God had designed the human and the divine to coagulate in one essence, i.e. you. So that's the story. That begins to be the story of how she starts out. And if you go back and you watch the movie, generally you'll see that the Toto begins to lead her in the journey. So the first one you see on the path, and if you know the path on the yellow brick road, it starts out as a what? Exactly. It starts out as a spiral. It goes back, and there's so many things that are woven into that movie. I'm a movie buff. And for years, I have said that Hollywood is really the true church. They are really the true ecclesia. They are really the true source of words and energies coming forth, and they are doing it in the ancient mythology. The only difference is they're doing it in movie form, and you go and watch it and don't know what you're watching, whereas the ancient mythologies did it in theatrical forms, where they did it as a play or in theater forms. And we thought they went there to the theaters to watch a man kill a lion, because that's what we've done. Hollywood sells that. Many times that's a good seller. We didn't know they went there to watch tremendous plays. And those plays were done in such a fashion that those plays ignited in you the energy, and we have not recognized what that energy is. If you were to take the word emotion, and I know that every one of you have done this, you put energy in motion. In other words, it's moving energy. Well, what is God? God is energy. My grandfather, I'll give you a little example. My grandfather was a very firm and hard task master, and I lived on his farm. I grew up on his farm, me and my brothers and my family. And my grandfather was a very successful, hard-working farmer. When he married my grandmother, he had nothing. When he died, he owned 1,600 acres, and he was a very wealthy man from just hard work, But his work, he didn't have an education. He didn't, have a high school or college degree, even though he knew how to write. He knew how to read and write, and kind of self-taught. But he would go out in the spring. He was a very successful farmer, planting crops. We did some wheat, mostly we did corn and either wheat or beans, soybeans, but mostly corn. And so Grandpa would go out, and I'd be out with him when I was little and watch him, and he would take his finger and he would stick it down into the ground, and he would pull it up, and then he would go back and set his planter on the sower to plant the seed that deep. Or he would plant it that deep. Or he would plant it that deep. Because he did that by a thing that we would call feeling. He could feel, trained in his finger, he could feel the warmth of the dirt and how deep it was, so that that corn would know where to be for that season. Most people don't know that. They sent some engineers from Georgia Tech, and I remember this, to come up to see how come my grandfather was successful at what he did. And they said, you can't do that. He did that. And what he did was, he used the energy of God in its true form, because emotion is designed to serve you, not you it. See, we have everything backwards. That's North Georgia for backwards. Backwards. And once we begin to adjust and realign many things start to also say, well, that makes sense. I tell people, I say, shouldn't God give you a book that makes sense? I've been dealing with this for so many years in my life. Most people say, I don't never read the Bible because it don't make sense. I said, well, I know. I said, that's really a shame. It should make sense. I know that it don't make sense for you to read it historically and literally. That's dumb. But if you read it and understand it, that it's not a historical book, that it is a mythological storybook, and it is about the physical body and how it works and how it's designed and how it's built, then it starts to make sense. Then you can start to see why that when you have something going awry in your physical body, that your body goes to war immediately. So the war and the killing that's going on in your own body is found in the Scriptures. And you thought it's where God said, go down there and kill all them Hittites, Canaanites, Jebusites, and Mittites, and Jabbites, all the bites. But if you like their women, keep them and have sex with them. And so we got so confused trying to serve that guy. Like in Numbers, I think it's Numbers chapter 24, it says, and the wrath of God was kindled against Naaman, I think. And you read that story and you say, well, God was really pissed off. He was mad. But you don't understand the Hebrew word off doesn't mean mad. It actually, the word means it was compassion, like a man making love to a woman. And you thought it was anger. And you were told that because you didn't understand what the word was really saying. But if you understood that and you saw the passion God had for this person or situation, you realize He's moved by this passion, which is very emotional. But we weren't taught that. So we read the word wrath and said He's mad. He's angry. He's wroth. But we just didn't know, right? And so now we're going to know. We're getting into the know. Amen? Yes. So back home, I keep Bibles piled up on the counter where people used to get saved. And I just pass them out. And because I know people come in, I said, well, here, you need to see this, because seeing it's believing, because I know you've heard it wrong. I know you have. If you've ever been to church, if you've ever listened to a television preacher, you've heard it wrong. Because they're usually selling it to make money. So I'm going to read some things to you. I'm reading from Matthew chapter 16 and verse 13, and I'll give you a couple of word translations of what words mean, because words, years ago, about 36, 37, 38 years ago, I was involved in a teaching group, and one of my teachers was Dr. Fuchsia Pickett. And maybe many of you have never heard of Dr. Pickett. She's been dead quite a number of years. Well, Dr. Pickett was one of my teachers then, and she told me, she said, Lynn, if you don't understand signs and symbols and numbers, you will never understand the Bible. And so I had already, that was out of several witnesses, that I began to realize that the Bible was the book of signs and symbols and numbers. And Paul even said, no, it's not that, it's an allegory. So Paul just simply said the whole thing is allegorical. So, you go to Galatians chapter 4 and you can read that. Paul made that very clear. He said, you're going to talk about Abraham, that's an allegory. Abraham and Sarah is an allegory. You mean they're not a historical person? No. What is an allegory? It's a fabulous story. It's a mythology that's telling tremendous truth. So, the Bible is full of things like this, but we don't know these things. So I'm going to read something to you in verse 13 of Matthew 16. It says, when Jesus came into the coast, Meros, the Greek word meros, when He came to the coast. Now see, immediately when I read that, because you associate words with pictures, right? I know that you do. That's why I do this on the board. Because if I'm going to rewire this thing up here that's really cross-wired, it's messed up. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do some work. Well, see, I've been a mechanic all of my life. And I know how to do surgery. And so I can go in here and I'm going to do some surgery on you. And I know the mechanics of that, so I've got to some places get gentle. Somewhere I'm going to get a big hammer. Because say some places it's stuck. And I even have boys that work for me, young boys, strong, strapped in. I said, "Ken, did you not break that loose?" "Well, no, I tried." "Well, move." And so I can always break it loose. It's not that I'm stronger, it's just that I know a technique. And so, you know, I'm 49, my oldest daughter is 48. Okay. So we came into the coast, and immediately what you saw right there when you seen the word coast is you saw a sandy beach and a boat coming up to it. But that's not what the word meros means. Actually, it means an allotment, or something that is apportioned to you. And every one of you have an allotment, and every one of you have an apportion, something that has been apportioned to you. I was talking to this lady sitting here about her signs and her birth chart, and so all of you don't know that that was a part of your allotment, and that's a part of your assignment, and it's been given to you here in your birth chart sign. So what happened to you during the 9 months that you gestated in your mother's womb was something that God did, because God builds His temple without the sound of a hammer and without the sound of a saw. Where does God build that temple? He builds it right there in the womb of the mom. And all you got to do is put your ear to the pregnant woman, and you will not hear any banging or any zzz going on. And all you hear is silence. But what's happening in that silence? A miracle is taking place. I had mentioned to John that I brought my laptop because I had about a 3 or 4 minute YouTube that I wanted to show of a seed released as a sperm as it goes up the canal on his way to the egg, and then cracks the egg, which they don't know how. They don't know where he finds the entrance, but he does, and gets in there, and then it begins to go. And you know, with just in seconds, with just in hours, it begins to multiply at such a rapid pace of millions of times. Cells are created and born. How does that happen? Who is directing this? Who has got the blueprint? Where's the foreplan? How does this know to go here? And just millions of things are happening in here. Well, duh. God. The intellect. The higher mind. This mind. Let this mind. Let this mind. Which one? That one that built its temple, its tabernacle. The Apostle Paul says, what? See, if you don't, you read New Testament books, and if you don't know which one's Paul and which one's not Paul, because there are many in there that aren't Paul, people get confused. They go to read Thessalonians, Timothy, Titus, and some of the other books, and they think it's Pauline. But here Paul wants to put a woman in submission, keep her home, cook. That's what he said. Tell them to be shut up in church. Tell them not to say anything. And over here in Romans 16, he says, I'm submitted to one of them myself. One of them says, she's an apostle, she's my teacher, she's my pastor. You know, he speaks that out of his own mouth. You say, Paul had schizophrenia. No, some people even try to excuse that or step beside it to say, well, Paul was on a progressive revelation, so he just didn't have the revelation that a woman couldn't be used. But he got it later.
You got married?
And they even do say that. Of course, if you read some of the lost books of the Bible, you read the story about Thalica, who traveled with him, slept in the tent with him. You do whatever you need to do with that. I personally just leave it the way it is. It's okay. I don't have to judge anything. When you get to a place where you don't have to pass any judgment on anybody, it's very peaceful.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's just that you come to a place where you understand what this rest is that's always belonged to you. You don't have to fight any wars no more. You don't have to get mad. You don't have to get upset. You don't have to, I wish I had your jar. You don't have to throw that, you change anymore. That's wonderful to get to that place. You come to the coast. This is not a sandy beach. This is talking about something you already have. It's something you've got. Because I'll show you the word in just a minute here. He said he came to the coast of Caesarea Philippi. The word Caesarea Philippi actually means your temporal force. If you haven't read Dr. Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, I highly recommend you read that. It should be 101. You should have to read that book. Dr. Hawkins' Power versus Force, it'll give you a better understanding of what religion and the church is, because it is a system that's built on force. So are our armed forces, and that's why they call them that, because it's a system that's built on the manipulation and the force behind ego-driven ideas. Church, religion, politics, wars between nations are all founded on that concept. But when you understand power, power is rooted and grounded in unconditional love, which is what God is. You understand it's power that's really the shaker and mover. It's power that really does something. Force can't really do what it wants you to think that it can do. Many times writers, because of really not knowing what they're saying or how they're using their words, many times they will use the word force where they should use the word power, or vice versa. But if you can grasp that, you can understand that. So the word Caesarea Philippi actually means temporal force. Do you understand when I'm talking about temporal force? This is a part of your allotment. This is a part of what God's given you. He's given you an ability through your temporal apparatus, which is your physical body, and its ego-driven passion, which is not wrong with it. And I'm not trying to get rid of your ego. I'm trying to bring it into a place where it's usable. And when you learn to use it the way it's designed to use, the tool will serve you and it won't cut your arm off. That's why I don't let my grandson Kip use my chainsaw. When he gets to a point where he can use the chainsaw, I'll let him use the chainsaw. Until that time, then he's under tutors. And as long as he's under the tutors, he cannot use the chainsaw. It doesn't mean he can't. It means there'll come a time when he can and he should. But he learns to use it responsibly. We are at that time. We are not on the threshold, folks. We are on the other side of the threshold. It's being given to us now. This wisdom, this knowledge is being poured out right now, all over the earth. And to me, it's just, I feel that we are one of the most phenomenal groups of people ever to live on the face of the earth. Even though I do admire many of my forefathers and many of my teachers who have lived and died hundreds and even thousands of years ago, they are still my forefathers. They're still my teachers as though they were alive today. I thank God for them. And I glean from what they said. I feast at their table. So it's like Mark said, if you come into my office, into my library, I have thousands of books that are around there. And I just bask in those because they are my teachers. They speak to me. And I've already gotten rid of a library. I wish I'd have kept part of it. I got rid of one of Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth, one of the early 68, 69, 70, 71 editions, where he put it in print where God was going to destroy the world, burn it up, and Jesus would come back before 1982. Obviously, that was a false prophet.
Amen.
I don't know how in the world they could still have him on TV. He's a false prophet. Why would you want to follow and buy the stuff and the material of a false prophet?
You just got the year wrong. Doesn't.
Oh,
You just keep.
what it's supposed to just happen. What John Hagee said just happened a few weeks ago. It's okay that they miss it. I mean,
Yes.
come on.
Uh-huh.
Caesarea Philippi means the temporal force of your personality and its false claim on your reality. Do you want me to give that to you again?
Yeah.
So if you break the word Caesarea Philippi down, it means the temporal force. And this is your allotment. This is what's given to you. It's given to you with that ability, that you have that ability. But there is another ability that's above that. And it's not designed so that you can destroy one of them, because one of them is very functional in this world that you live in. And you need it. Well, I need it. We need it. I need it. You need it. I enjoy mine. I mean, hell, I love to eat. I enjoy eating. I enjoy food. I hadn't found food I don't like. Except one. I hadn't, and I'll eat it, but I'm not fond of it. So if you ask me to go eat with you, I will eat with him. And Rome be like the Romans. I don't like raw sushi. So I'm sorry. If y'all like raw fish, you can go right there. But now I do like deep fried sushi. We have a Thai restaurant there at home, you know, home-owned, really a good restaurant. And they have what they call an American sushi. They deep fry that stuff. Boy, I put some good grease. It's good. Okay. So, in the Caesarea Philippi, again, I'll give it to you. It's a temporal force of your personality with its influence on you about what is your reality. Wow. You didn't know that was Caesarea Philippi. You thought that was over in the Middle East. You didn't realize that was your allotment. It's the portion God gave you. And the sad thing is we have allowed our temporal force to manipulate us and tell us that's real when it really wasn't real. It's constantly changing. So, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Of course, this is a personal pronoun referring to the story of Jesus. And the character in the story of Jesus is Jesus, of course. Who do men say that I, the Son, in Hebrew that would be Ben, 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 that's Beth, and Non. This is a 700, and this is a 2. This is called Ben. B-E-N. Ben, Ben. Who do they say that I, Ben Adam, Alif, Dalit, Mem. Now, Hebrew always goes backwards, right to left, okay? So, Matthew is Hebraic. You don't know that. I've talked to Christians that think that the 4 Gospels were one of the 4 apostles, or one of the 12 apostles. I said, that's dumb. I said, Luke wasn't even a Hebrew. Luke was a Greek doctor.
Yeah.
Well, we got a Greek doctor in a Hebrew book here. What's that all about? Some of y'all look like, why? Are you kidding me? It's your own Bible. All you got to do is read it. Look at it. Luke is a Greek doctor. He wrote the first half of the books of Acts and the book of Luke in Greek. Is that right, Mark? So he obviously wasn't one of the 12 apostles and one of the 12 disciples. So it's just so many things that we get so off base. Caesarea Philippi, he asked, who do they say that I, the Son of Man, am? Ben Adam. Now, I'm playing hard on this word because I want to talk about it a little bit more. Who do they say I? Who do they, them out there, who do they say I am? Who do they? That's all them folks out there. Who do they say that I, Ben Adam, am? Now, what he said when he said Ben Adam, you probably haven't had an ear to hear that because you don't know who that is. Because if I were to take this word Adam down and really try to understand it, I would more or less say that it's a human. I would not be very accurate to say that it's just a son. Because what if it was a girl? What if I had a child and it was a girl? I said, oh well, that don't count. Let's make another baby. How do you feel about that? But when you understand some of these words, you begin to realize, no, it wasn't talking about a boy or a girl as our son or daughter. It was talking about a human. It was talking about a child. It was talking about an heir. Most of you don't know that a woman could be an heir. In the Bible? Of course. So when you read these words and you don't realize what these words are saying, then you won't understand what the picture is trying to say to you. You won't understand what the picture is conveying. So he said, who do they say that I am, the Son of Man? And they said unto him, some say that you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elias, or one of the Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And he said, but whom do you say that I am? And Peter said, I know who you are. Peter got this one, didn't he? Verse 16, he said, Peter answered and he said, you are the Christ. Now, Christ. He said, you're the Christ. Oh, here it comes. This is, I do this in color usually. I do have some color. Can y'all see this blue okay? You can, can't you?
Yes.
Everybody can see the blue? I usually like to do this in color. And I do it because I do it in color. I like to do it in color. Now y'all see that? Look, this is called the Fabulous Stick Man. Okay? See it? There they are. The Stick Man. The Fabulous Stick Man. 20-something years ago, I was doing a complete exegesis on the book of Revelation as it is the unveiling of the Christ, not as a person. Because if you went in any camp today and you said, who is the Christ? Do you know most people will add a noun to that? Christ is not a noun, is it, Mark? It's not even a pronoun, is it? Y'all didn't know that, did you? It is not the name of a person. The ancient mythologies knew and understood what the Christ, coming from the Greek Christos, they knew that it wasn't referring to a person. So Jesus is saying, whom do they say that I am? And Peter stands up and he said, I know who you are. You're the Christ. Well, right up here in your cerebrum, which is your upper brain, right up here, your Sarah Abram, has a division right there. There is this little fluid right around through here called your colostrum. Right? It comes from the word gray matter. Did you know you had that? Gray matter. Produces a fluid and a pineal gland. Well, I really like to do this in color, but nevertheless, produces a fluid that flows through your nerve system. There are not two trees in the garden. There's only one tree.
Amen.
These trees overlay each other. These are not two systems. They're actually one. It tells you that in Genesis 2:9. It says in the midst of the garden. It doesn't say in the midst of the garden there were two trees. It does not say that. It doesn't imply that. It shows two aspects of one tree. And the two aspects of those one tree is one that is a nerve system. And that nerve system, you notice I call this gray matter, the colostrum, connects to your cerebrum, produces a fluid that flows through your spinal column, through your whole body, through your whole nerve system. That fluid in color, you can look at this in Gray's Anatomy, if you want to look at it in a Gray's Anatomy. That fluid in color is honey. Yellowish. Your pineal gland, which is right here in the center, also produces a fluid, an oil. That's exactly what it is. It's an oil. Your pineal gland produces an oil that also flows in this same nerve system, this same tree, that produces a fluid that's milky looking. Milk, white and yellow. How many of you ever heard of the land that flows with milk and honey? Okay, I'm showing you the land that flows with milk and honey. Actually, I'm actually showing you the garden, the Gan of God. The word garden in the Hebrew is the word Gan, which actually means a protected place. You are the protected place that God flows in. And so when Jesus said this, he said, I know who you are, you're the Christ. So he understood in this mythology, the word Christos means oil. In the Old Testament, it was the Hebrew word Mashiach. So the same thing in Mashiach, and you know what they called the Mashiach? It was the king of the body. And so they were looking for the king of the body. Why? Because it is the oil that transmits the nerves throughout the whole system so that the emotions and the intuitive nature can flow unhindered and produce what it needs to be producing. So my grandfather had trained his finger, he could stick it in the ground, and he said the seed needs to go 3 inches deep because he trained his crystals so that it knew exactly how the earth would take its seed. So the story here is saying the same thing. He said, well, we know you're the Christ. You're the oil. You're the oil, the honey that's flowing into the body. Let's read the story further. Peter said, you're the Christ. Jesus answered, and he said unto them, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh has not revealed this unto you, but for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, but my Father in heaven. And I say unto you that you are Peter, and on this rock, this oil, this revelation, this understanding, not a person, because the Catholic Church took that Bible and deceived you, and they said Peter was the rock, and they built their first church on the rock of Peter as the first pope, and they have taken the keys away from you and have kept you locked out ever since. And that's how you interpret that. That was not the rock, and that was not the key. Right here is the rock, and right here is the key. It's the Christ, and it's the Christ that's inside you. And you didn't pray a prayer and get that inside you. That's always, you were born that way because God deposited in you as God formed you and built you without a hammer and a saw. That's you. And he says that I say unto you, you're Peter, and on this I will build. I will confirm. That's what it means actually to build. Actually, he just says, I will confirm myself. And he does. God confirms himself all the time. He confirms himself to you, through you, in you, as you, and also as him. And I will build my church, my ecclesia, my origin, my source, my power, my energy. Where do your words come from? They come from deep within the being of yourself. And you know, you want to, this lady was asking me also about meditation. I said, you really want to, the best meditation you get into is the meditation of just total silence. Yes. Total silence. I mean, I'm not against chance. Wow. We got Technicolor. It was black and white in the beginning, and then we went to color. Hallelujah. I'm glad you did that because it will help to, let me do a few things that I can do with a few of these colors. Let me just do this. I'll mark over these colors so that, because this also has to do with the rainbow. I have a yellow one. It's hard to find a yellow marker, and you can't hardly see a yellow marker on whiteboard. It's hard to see it, really hard. How many of you remember the story of Moses? I'm talk to you while I'm doing this. How many of you remember the story of Moses? And Moses crossed the what? Huh? Look at it in Hebrew. It's not red. It's actually green. Y'all didn't know he crossed the green sea, did you? If you look it up in Moffat's translation, they got it right. It's the green sea. Who did he cross the green sea with? Yes. I'll show you. He crossed the green sea with Is. Ra. El. If you can understand that, Is in Hebrew means to stand, substance, material, physical. Ra, which is a multifaceted word, the Rash Ayin, this is where God begins to see. This is directly connected. You call it your heart chakra. Or I would call it, if I'm looking at the glands, I would call it the heart. So, very, very important. Blue water, water is the source of your words. Moses said we have to cross the reed. That's exactly what the Hebrew says, the reed, R-E-E-D, reed. The reason they call it reed is because it's green. The reason it's green is because the reed, the plant, the reed is green in color, and it was so filled with reed that it was the color green to represent the heart chakra, because this is where it all plays out at. Ezekiel says your problem is your heart's divided. What you want to do, you want to tear down the middle wall of partition. So when you get rid of the middle wall of partition, then your heart won't be divided. However, to stay with biblical, I tell you, this is the most powerful, metaphysical, New Age, scientific, I wish I had some other words, book that's on the face of the earth. But because religion has tampered with it and got its hands a hold of this, they have made it the meanest, the greediest, the most vile book on the face of the earth.
Amen.
And what our job is, we've already stepped into this dimension. We're not on the threshold about to crawl into it. We've already stepped into this dimension. Our dimension is to go back and to find the key and go back and unlock the mysteries. I sent an article out with my monthly CD a couple of months ago, and I said that the Bible is a treasure chest of jewels of wisdom and knowledge and treasures beyond. You think that you're something, if you hit the lottery, man, when you begin to open and crack the code of this book, you hit the lottery of lotteries. All you need is the key to crack the codes of this book. And once you begin to get your hands on a few of these keys, I tell you, you become unstoppable. There is an energy that's going to be released. It's the energy of God that begins to be released inside your very being. That is the energy that gives you the ability to walk on water, which actually is your physical being, because your physical being, you're a water person. You remember Kevin Costner's old movie, Waterworld? Yeah. You have goals. Goals. You can breathe. Hallelujah. You can breathe supernatural air. We need to go back and learn to sit at the feet of our Hollywood pastors and churches, because movies have tremendous revelation in them. If you'll just go back, go watch them. Don't get mad and upset with them because they have a little sex scene or something like that, a little hanky-panky going on. Y'all doing that anyway. Or they get drunk, or something happens. Don't get all bent out of shape. They use a few words they shouldn't use, A couple words I can't use. Couple. There's tremendous revelation in those movies. How many of you saw The Matrix? Did you get it? Did you get it? Not the first one? I can go back and watch it time and just keep extracting from it. Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I've watched it dozens of times. With my kids, grandkids. The Ninja Turtles, some of these little programs, they have got great wisdom rolled up in them. But you know what? Christianity said, oh, that's of the devil. You better not touch that.
One come out called Lucy.
Lucy. Israel, power. Power. If you haven't read Power verses 4, you need to read it. Power. Where does power come from? It comes from your cerebrum. Your cerebrum is I think Barbara was telling me last night, I don't think she finally did tell you, but she said you can feel her head got a soft spot in it, beginning to soften up. You know why? Because there is a Hebrew word called cabal. It's used in Job chapter 2. And it's the root word for Kabbalism. Those of you who are familiar with the term of Kabbalism. Kabbalism is ancient Hebrew and the mystical language of ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. And so Kabbalah, actually the word cabal simply means a receiver or an antenna. So right here is the cerebrum, and the top of your head is the antenna that receives the voice, the energy, the volumer. That's the Hebrew word volumer, used 10 times in the book of Genesis for the one word saith. God don't speak with vocal cords because God don't have vocal cords other than yours.
Right.
Because God's not in a physical body like a man other than you.
Right.
So the only vocal cords that God has are your vocal cords. So what is God doing when He's speaking? He's volumaire. He's emanating.
Yes.
How does He do that? He emanates, and every time He emanates and you intake. Do you know what you got? You could have gotten a word. You could have gotten a paragraph. You may have got an entire book. But you don't know it because we don't know how to shut this thing down back here. And just be silent and just be quiet. Just, you want to learn wisdom, you can get some knowledge by reading a lot of books. I've read a lot of books. But a lot of things that I get, I grapple and I wrestle with books. I grappled and wrestled with this book from the very first day I started reading it. And I would ask questions and I'd argue with God. Yeah, but God. Then finally I got to the point because my teacher was Finest Jennings Dakin. He had it memorized. He memorized the Bible. And that's a pretty awesome feat. So I thought, well, I've got to memorize the Bible. So I started out to try to memorize the Bible. Because if he could do it, I had to be able to do it, I thought. So I got to the point I could argue God's own book back with him about as good as he could argue back with me. Yeah, but God says here. Yeah, but it said. So we had a dialogue going on. You know, I'm going to be like Moses. I'm going to put you in the corner and bless God make you repent. Because I'm not liking a lot of the things that I was hearing because the things that I was hearing are the things that you heard, and many of you built your lives on those, were not true.
Yeah.
And there was something inside me that wanted truth. And then I began to realize Jesus said, John 8, you will know the truth. It's gnosko. It's intuitive. Where is the intuitive thing? The intuitive. Where does that... Do y'all know what that is? That's called the staff of Hermes. That's the oldest symbol, one of the oldest symbols in the world. They date that symbol back 36,000 years, along with the emerald tablets. It's called the caduceus. If you're a medical doctor, you have that on your diploma. I began to share with my wife's neurologist about the caduceus. And he said, the what? I said, it's there on your diploma. He said, it is? I said, yeah. I said, don't you know what it is? I said, it's the staff of Moses. It's Mount Nebo. He said, well, what is it? I said, well, this is your brain. These are the 5 tablets, which are the wings of the eagle, which are the 5 tablets of Moses on Mount Nebo, which is the cherubim. The word cherubim simply means phenomenal thought. The phenomenal thought is the winged creature that you've got. Do you know why? Because your thoughts right now can be down at Walmart. It wasn't bound by these walls. Your thoughts can be in Georgia. Your thoughts can be they can go back in Australia. They don't have boundaries. Your thoughts can penetrate the veil. Your thoughts can break the hymen. Get that. Your thoughts can tear down the middle wall of partition. Or they can build it up. Did y'all get that?
Yes.
Selah. The caduceus. The serpent on the pole. This is intuition. This is emotion and experience. Emotion and experience is a two-twanged cord. They're your 2 inner senses. They're the inner senses that make up the things that give you cosmic ability. They give you spiritual intuitiveness, abilities beyond, well, they make you supra, above natural, beyond normal. But it's normal. See, you just didn't know it was normal. So, you know, people say, well, I get these guys. They come in my shop, I just love to get them. I'll say, I have preachers come in there, they always come back. Sometimes they come back and argue. Paul, what is Paul's last name? Paul, he was just in the shop last week. He was the professor of historical studies at Lynn University there in Cleveland, which is about 20 miles from my shop. And my shop is just it's just a rundown shack. Garage, greasy, junk cars. I don't throw nothing away. Ain't nothing. I keep it. So I have got stuff, and I know where it's at too. I may have 300 used tires, but I know where every one of them are, and I know exactly the size of it and how much it's worth. And I don't have it on a computer. I have it right there. And so Paul come down there, and because I sat under Finest Jennings Dake, I wore 2 of these completely out. I have one that I can't use it, it falls completely apart. And that's the one that Dake gave me in 1976. Dake gave me my first Bible, or my first study Bible, because I was one of his students. I was his aggravating student. And so and he personally signed that Bible. So I don't know if it has any value, but it has value. It had value to Paul because that man is revered among those circles, and many of the charismania circle, Pentecostal circles, really highly revere Dake. And I personally knew him. So Paul would come and we sat in dialogue. So finally he said, I need for you to come up and speak to the history department. I said, well, Paul, you can do it. All you got to do is do your own research. And he said, yeah, but I hadn't done it the way you've done it. So he sat there, and me and him sat in my office, which the floor runs downhill like this. And my desk is, oh, God, I can't even describe it, I'll tell you. But I know where everything's at, don't touch it. Then Paul comes in here, he's a professor. They paid him $150,000, $200,000 a year. He asked me to go with him to Amsterdam in 2017 and was going to put me on the roster to speak with him to a large group of people, and he had a stroke, so he had to postpone that trip. So he was in the shop the other day, and we were discussing. He's getting much better. He had the stroke about 6 or 8 months ago, and it was pretty serious. But they have just let him start to drive, which he really shouldn't be driving. And I don't even know why I told y'all that. Anyway, I've talked to people in high places, and many of those people in high places are as hungry as anybody I know. And sometimes they're not as arrogant as they actually appear to be or act like. Because if you talk to them, if you know how to talk to them with some sense, they'll talk. Because me and Paul have sat in dialogue and done tremendous dialogue. So I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody. Some people think, well, you're trying to take away my Jesus. I am not. If that serves you, you need to hold on to it. I am not. I say things that may make you stumble over your personal Jesus. But I tell you that, and I have a series called The Greatest Story Ever Told, that I say in that series that this Jesus story is the most phenomenal story that's ever told, because the Jesus story does incorporate all religions. And people don't even know that. And so I'm not against it. I'm 100% for it. So the oil, the Christos, he said, who do they say that I am? I want to come back and maybe kind of close and wind this down, I guess. Is that okay? I mean, we're on a time frame. I had someone say, well, the mind can only endure as much as the rear can stand, and I know y'all's eyes is getting pretty sore right now. We've been here a long time, and it's hard to keep y'all awake because you're so full of barbecue. One word I want to come back and then we'll pick up here tonight that I want you to look at. I want to say this thing. So here we go in verse 16. Now I've already said here in verse 13, Jesus said, whom do they say that I, the Son of Man, am? Right? And then here in verse 16, here it says, Simon Peter answered and said, I know who you are. Now this is not they, this is Peter. So here in verse 16, Peter said, he said, I know you, I got you. And now Peter says, he didn't just say, now you are the son of, you are the being. That's the, let me get my black one and write that. It's amazing they do this with these words in Hebrew, and nobody, the translator didn't necessarily catch it, or if they did catch it, they didn't do anything with it. That's the Hebrew word ben. But yet here is another word that we see in Hebrew. That's bar. Both words pretty much mean the same thing. Bar actually carries the idea with an heir. Ben carries the idea of a child. More a child, but most always translated son. Bar carries the word and the idea not only a child, but a child that is the heir. So this word, bar, in Hebrew, and you wouldn't know it because they always translated in English as son or son. So if you didn't know Hebrew, you'd never notice that. You'd never catch those glyphs. But there's a tremendous difference in those two glyphs. And so Peter catches that here because he's working off of this divine oil that's flowing into his body. He's got the Christ. He's understanding who this Christ is. This oil is flowing in his system. So now that his system's lubricated, everybody say lubricated. Lubricated. It's working. And if there's not lubrication, then there can be friction. And if there's too much friction, then the thing can either lock down or come apart. It'd tear it up. If you don't have the oil in it or right oil, if you drive your car here without any oil in it, somebody have to take you home. Well, go with me to Genesis chapter 1 now, and I want to show you something. This is what everything's about. If you get the foundation right, then you can build a house. If you hadn't got your foundation right, then my advice to you would be dig it up and build it again. Because if it's not right, you can build your house, but the winds and the storms will come. This is a land of hills and valleys. Canaan is a land of hills and valleys. You know what that means? Good times, bad times. It's a time of being happy and a time of being sad. This is a place of contrast. You can't get rid of the contrast. To get rid of the contrast, it means to get out of this system. And so this is a land of contrast, and when we understand the contrast is here to serve me. It's not here. I mean, how would you like it if you just lived here and never did rain? No, you wouldn't like that. You want it to rain. You want it to rain. So, Taurus and Dorothy earth signs. Leo is a fire sign. Scorpio is an air sign. And Aquarius, the brain, is a water sign. Now, if you can see the board, when I put on the board, which is what everything in the astrological movement of the sun, the moon, and the planetary systems are all about, here's what they're all about. I'm going to put it on this board in a straight up and down motion here, and you can see it. And I'll add you some valve points to it so that you will have a better understanding of it. Earth represents carbon. Fire represents nitrogen. Air represents oxygen. Water represents hydrogen. JHVH in Hebrew, Yod He Vav He, you would pronounce because you add it. It's not a personal pronoun. It's not somebody's name, but you call it Jehovah because you thought that it was somebody. But it ain't. It's carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. It's that builds everything in this dimension. And some of these in this dimension add a quintessence to it, or a fifth element. And many of the alchemists, that's what they used, was the fifth element to do their alchemy. True alchemy hadn't got anything to do with turning lead into gold, other than it just simply says, you are a lead bottom person, but you need to be gold. That's all it means. You need to turn your lower, base, natural, carnal, temporal force, amen, into the higher vibration, into God, into who God is, into who God said you should be. I'll close with this right here, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. In Hebrew, it's the word Bereshit. Bar Aleph, which you would spell it like this, B-A-R-A, Bara. But in Hebrew, it's Bar Aleph. Bereshit, at birthing, Elohim, God, God's, G-O-D-S, Elohim is plural in Hebrew. It's called the seven-powered energy. The reason it's seven-powered because the rainbow is a symbol of its seven-powered. Elohim, in the beginning, Bara, son of Aleph. Aleph is the first Hebrew letter, number 1, and it means this book is about the story of God's Son. That's what the whole book's about. And it tells you right there, it's in the first 12 glyphs in the Hebrew. Translated, in the beginning, God created.
Wow.
I'll just unhook right there.
Awesome.
Yes.
So, Lynn, what are you going to continue on tonight with? What are you going to continue on tonight with?
Right here. I'll pick up right here. Bara. Because that's what this whole book is about. I want to show you the Tabernacle of Solomon. I want to show you Genesis 1, 2, and 3. It's I call it a blueprint. I call it a diagram of the embryo as it grows in the womb. And I'll show it to you from the Hebrew so that you won't have any question. I want to show you who Satan, or actually, you call it the serpent. In Hebrew, it's the Nachesh. I'm going to show you what the Nachesh is. Right here's the Nachesh. You heard in Genesis 3:1, what does it say? And the serpent said. This is the serpent. When you understand what the serpent is, and you understand that it's God's nature in you, they told you it was a snake.
Yes.
The Hebrew word for snake is sa'ir, not nachesh. So I'll pick it there.
That's good to hear.
I was just going to ask if we could have a couple of minutes for questions.
I'm tired. I gotta go. I got a book I need to go. I have a book waiting on me. No, I'm teasing. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm exploding with information. A lot of this I've been learning, and I want to say it makes perfect sense. And I guess the best way I could put it, to touch on my journey, where I am at, where I'm physically living, located, very tough environment to be in. And I have like every spectrum of all of this around me. So it's really hard to feel where my place is. So I have been, I'm with like traditional religious people. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Ian Clayton. Okay, so you will know where I'm coming from. So there's kind of like a spectrum here, very, people that are in the church system. Ian Clayton's kind of bringing people out a little bit, but there's a lot of that fundamentalist thinking entrenched with Ian Clayton. So this all makes perfect sense, but there's all these offshoot teachings that are flying out like fireworks, and I feel like I'm in the middle of it all, where you got people taking these teachings, and there's, we were created by aliens, the Elohim are really aliens, or the reptilians, all of these entities and dimensions, and I'm going, oh my goodness, and then you have the, don't quite listen to this because you're going to be deceived. Okay, so Ian Clayton, that group's very much like, they're just taking truth, and it's Satan in disguise, and they're going in the wrong portal, and they're not under the blood of Jesus. You will understand what I'm talking about. Oh, and it's very hard to be sitting in the middle of
Is
all
that the
this.
same city that Amos lived in? Hell,
I just say all that to say, like, this all resonates, but I'm also, there's just this part in me that's going, oh, I want to cry. Where am I? I'm not in Kansas anymore.
Really, Dorothy, you never left. It's a dream.
But Ian Clayton even talks about the difference between Hebrew and Greek thought.
Yes, the Yahweh, I mean, there's a whole meditation.
And there's a lot of stuff that a lot of these guys are studying of the difference in Hebrew and Greek thought, and they're slowly coming out with it because people are so addicted to Western thinking. So you're hearing a lot of these people use these terms, and they're being drugged into these things. But if you understand, even he is saying, you got to come to the point that you go directly to the throne of God. You don't go point 1, point 2, Greek thought. You go directly to the throne of God, Hebrew thought. That's what we're talking about. That it's a verb. It's a movement. It's an energy. It's not, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. And he said it. We're no longer talking about crossing the thresholds. We are moving into it. And so even Clayton even brings that out. And so that's what this is. It's a completely radical way of thinking. And we're not in any way trying to make you think anything to think.
Right. No, and I'm all in that. I think it's just the atmosphere and everything that kind of comes out of it and processing all of that. Because, when for 20 years, I'm you're just going, okay, like my spirit's like, I know the truth, but do I know the truth?
Well, the thing I want to mention is that Ian Clayton has a big ministry, and he has to keep people under him.
Yes.
So, trust me, and, and I'm not, and I mean, I'm just saying, let me rephrase, I'm not judging him for that.
Right.
I mean, he's got his responsibility to people that he's in relationship with, and that's fine.
Yes.
But, like for me, I'm not, I see things and I'm like,
It's the same.
okay, it's the same system.
It's
It's the same,
And
it's still the
And
system.
what's happening now is we're entering into that time. We're in that time where no man will teach you. And you have to rely on your own Christ within, Holy Spirit, guidance, whatever you want to call it, to lead you and guide you into all truth. And heretofore, what we've done is we've relied and we've put ourselves under coverings of men, and we have had to submit ourselves under that covering and adopt what they teach. And when you don't adopt what they teach, there's a certain amount of ostracization going on. And then that leads to rejection and fear and manipulation and control. But now, it seems as though meetings like this, when you are just prodded to think for yourself. Think for yourself. And one of the, what was it, the straw man got a brain. I mean, we are supposed to think for ourselves, not lean on the understanding of men, but we begin to embrace who and what we are and the guidance that has always been there, but has been somewhat covered up by our nature that is egocentric. So now is that time.
I have a real simple answer for this solution, because so many people come to me and say, well, we live in such a religious area, and our area is so bound up with religious spirits. And so, you know, that's not in College Station, Texas. That's everywhere I go, all over the world.
Yeah.
So you're not in a unique place here. My suggestion to all of you is move to Dalton. It is there every Sunday. Free flowing. Isn't it a free flow? There's not a hindering spirit there. I cast them all out. I told them, I said, hell, I own the building and I own the property. You can leave.
Okay, with this, if it's all right, and you're ready to wrap up, this is one of my favorite quotes. The Son of Man is the Son of Man is humanity expressed through slumbering divinity. The Son of Man is humanity expressed through slumbering divinity. The Son of God is divinity expressed through awakened humanity. Isn't that good? And this is where we're going. This is the land we're apprehending. It is enlightenment. It's awakening. It's departing the structures that had us bound with fear. You know, I say in my book that, you know, the scriptures say over 600 times is it to fear not, and yet Christianity is largely based on fear of missing it, of getting it wrong, of being deceived. So my best advice for anybody is if it is something that provokes fear, don't put your foot on that stone on your path. Draw it back. If it's something that produces joy and love, step there. And then one foot in front of the other, keep on finding those places of joy, of love, of non-judgment, and especially love, because love never fails. Never fails.
Let me mention, can I say one thing?
Sure.
John and Susan Wade handle my monthly CD. So if any of you would be interested in being on, since you can't be in Dalton every Sunday, you can get a CD every month.
Yeah.
It's free or by donation, whatever. And so, John and Susan, would y'all?
Do you have a list somewhere? Or?
Yes, I have a little book. If you'll just come and write your name in this little book, we'll add you to the list. With pleasure.
Monthly CD.
All right, well, we're going to be back here at 7 o'clock. Y'all have a good rest.